You know that feeling when you check your bank account after a grueling month of 60-hour weeks? You did everything right, didn't you? You went to college, you landed the quote-unquote good job, and you finally hit that magical six-figure milestone that your parents swore was the ultimate mark of success. And yet, you look at that balance and realize you are basically just treading water. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack exactly why you feel this way. Let's dive right into this massive disconnect because it is just wildly frustrating. You live in a country that is practically overflowing with prosperity, but your day-to-day life probably feels way less like living the dream and a lot more like a high-stakes survival game. And the rules, yeah, they feel like they're constantly being rewritten against you. I mean, how is it even possible that the system produces so much wealth, but your paycheck literally vanishes before the month even really gets going? To really grasp the scale of what we're talking about here, we have to start with this absolutely staggering number from the Federal Reserve. They estimate that total U.S. household wealth is sitting at $170 trillion. That makes the United States the richest civilization in human history. So on paper, America is completely loaded. There is literally more money in the system right now than ever before. But as we're going to see, that massive number is really just a mask for a much darker reality. When you actually break down how that $170 trillion is stacked up, it tells a completely different story. Since 1990, wealth growth has been almost entirely concentrated in the top 0.1% and the top 10%. Meanwhile, the lower 50% of Americans have seen virtually zero real wealth growth in 35 years. None. So when you hear people say the economy is booming, well, they're right, but that boom is highly concentrated at the very top. This next point perfectly explains that sheer burnout you're feeling. Since 1979, the productivity of the American worker has shot up by nearly 62%. You are producing more, you're working faster, and you're driving massive corporate profits. But your wages? They've only grown by about 17.5%. You're essentially working 3 times as hard for a fraction of the reward, while the top earners are capturing the vast majority of the gains from all your hard work. The real kicker here is that while your paycheck has barely budged, the cost of just existing has completely exploded. Over the last 50 years, average household income only grew by 16%. But think about the core pillars of the American dream. Housing costs, they jumped 190%. College tuition surged an unbelievable 264%. The math is getting so brutal that experts actually estimate to live a standard middle-class life in a major American city by 2026, you might need an income of $300,000 a year. The things that used to guarantee stability are just skyrocketing completely out of reach. Brings us to what experts are now calling the squeezed middle. If you fall into this demographic, you're technically doing better than the bottom tier. I mean, you might have a really decent job title and a good salary, but you've been entirely stripped of the security that used to define the middle class. You're stuck in this weird, precarious limbo where everyone around you is telling you you're doing great, but privately, you feel completely vulnerable. Let's just walk through a real-world example of this disappearing act. Imagine a family in suburban Texas making over $100,000 a year. Sounds like a lot of wealth, right? But their $3,000 biweekly check quickly drops to $2,200 after taxes and essential benefits. Then, take out $1,700 for rent and maybe $800 for 2 average car payments. Before they have even bought groceries or paid the electric bill, the money is just gone. There was absolutely nothing left over for the actual thriving part of the... This squeeze is actually the direct result of something economists call the risk shift. Over the last few decades, the systemic burden for major life expenses, things like a secure retirement, affordable healthcare, and higher education, has been completely transferred. It was moved away from government safety nets and employer pensions and placed directly onto your shoulders. It leaves everyday people feeling like they are just one medical emergency or one unexpected layoff away from total financial ruin. So how exactly are Americans surviving this massive gap between stagnant wages and exploding costs? Well, they're financing it. The debt survival game has basically become the new normal. But we really have to ask ourselves a tough question here. When every dollar you earn is already assigned to a credit card company or a loan servicer before it even hits your checking account, are you really earning money? Or are you just acting as a middleman for your lenders? Let's break down the specific traps holding so many of us down. Outside of mortgages, household debt is overwhelmingly tied up in student loans and auto loans. College was heavily sold to us as the golden ticket to security, but now it essentially acts as a permanent tax on your earnings. In cars, this is wild, but the average monthly payment for a new car has completely surged past the $700 mark. People are constantly financing depreciating assets just so they can commute to work. With all that in mind, it is no wonder that nearly 60% of American adults cite their level of debt as their #1 source of anxiety.
It's just this constant underlying hum of stress in the background of your life. It's not just a math problem on a spreadsheet. It's a heavy, emotional, and psychological burden that completely shapes how you experience your day-to-day reality.
This sentiment perfectly captures the psychological weight of literally owing your future to someone else. When your income is already spoken for, your freedom shrinks. That underlying precarity means you can't really take risks, you definitely can't easily change careers, and you certainly can't just relax. You are simply managing the catastrophe, basically praying the transmission in your car doesn't blow or that nobody in your family gets sick. But we also have to take a hard look in the mirror here, because our own spending habits often respond to this stressful system in ways that keep us trapped. Enter lifestyle inflation. Every single time you get a raise or land a better job, you upgrade your car, your apartment, or your vacations. You're resetting your financial baseline at a higher level, which means despite earning more money, you're making zero actual progress toward true security. You're just running way faster on the exact same treadmill. And why exactly do we do this? Well, the digital age has a lot to answer for. Social media acts as the ultimate net negative for our financial mental health. We are constantly bombarded by hyper comparisons. It becomes this ridiculous, never-ending measuring contest. Even if you're doing incredibly well by any objective standard, you feel poor simply because some influencer has a 30-foot boat while you only have a 20-foot one. It pretty much guarantees your expectations will always outpace your actual income. And the consequence of all this isn't just a low bank balance. It is physically devastating. 4 in 10 Americans actually report that money negatively affects their mental health. We're talking chronic headaches, grinding your teeth at night, and severe insomnia. And worse, because we tie so much of our self-worth to these external financial markers, we hide our struggles. We've morphed from a society of shared community into isolated hermits in cubicles, crippled by financial shame. So yeah, we've outlined a pretty brutal reality here. The system is definitely skewed, the costs are totally out of control, and our own psychology is working against us. But how do we escape this illusion? How do we stop just surviving month to month and start reclaiming our peace of mind and our actual, tangible freedom? On a macro level, economists and policy experts propose several systemic interventions to help alleviate this squeezed middle class. These proposals include protecting at least $1,000 a week from wage garnishments, which would allow people to actually survive while paying down debt. Other suggested measures are expanding Medicaid to reduce medical debt, passing the PRO Act to give workers more bargaining power against stagnant wages, and reinstating child tax credits, which have been shown to directly reduce household debt. Bullock, you can't just sit around waiting for Congress to save you. You have to make some individual behavioral shifts right now to survive the squeeze, finding what we call the golden middle. First, you have to fundamentally disconnect your self-worth from your net worth. Second, ruthlessly limit your exposure to social media flexing. Stop comparing your everyday life to someone else's curated highlight reel. And finally, reinvest your time into genuine relationships. Community costs absolutely nothing, but it provides immense stability. Ultimately, you have to realize that the immense $170 trillion wealth of the country is completely irrelevant to you if your own boundaries and burnout aren't managed. Security is not a macroeconomic data point. It is strictly about how much of your own life and your own money you actually control. Living below your means and owning your time is literally the only way to insulate yourself from all the noise. Which leaves us with this final thought. Look really closely at where your money goes this month and ask yourself, are you truly building your own wealth and buying your own freedom? Or are you just exhausting yourself to finance an illusion of the American dream? It's time to take your control back. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.